What if those random moments in life weren't random at all? What if the universe was quietly guiding you through symbols, signs, and strange coincidences, waiting for you to notice? Claire Jensen had lived her life by the book, not a literal book, but the kind everyone carries silently inside. Study hard, be kind, get married, build a home, be reliable. At 42, she was everything the world told her to be. A school counselor in Seattle, married to David for 18 years, living in a quiet green neighborhood where the sidewalks smelled like cedar after rain. But on an ordinary Tuesday morning, in the quiet hum of their kitchen, David looked up from his coffee and said the one sentence that unhooked her from everything she thought was true. "Claire, I'm not in love with you anymore." He said it softly, almost apologetically, as if he'd just spilled something on her favorite sweater. Claire didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at the steam rising from her mug and felt nothing. No anger. No panic. Just a silent unraveling, like thread being pulled from the edge of a sweater she didn't know was fraying. In the days that followed, Claire functioned like a machine set on low battery. She went to work, smiled faintly at students, replied to emails with one-liners, fed her cat, folded laundry. But inside, everything had gone still, like someone had pressed mute on the soundtrack of her soul. It wasn't depression exactly, more like dissociation. She felt like a ghost drifting through her own life. There were no tears, no yelling matches, just a slow, cold silence, the kind that fills the house after a funeral, when the last guest has left, and all that's left are coffee cups and unfinished goodbyes. At night, she'd lie in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, wondering, was this it? Was that all love was? One drizzly Saturday, Claire wandered into an old independent bookstore downtown. She wasn't looking for anything. She just couldn't stand the silence of her house anymore. The shop was small, dust-scented, with creaky wooden floors and jazz playing softly from a speaker behind the counter. She walked without direction, past poetry, biographies, cookbooks, until her elbow accidentally knocked a book off a high shelf. It landed at her feet with a soft thud. She bent down and picked it up. Synchronicity and a Causal Connecting Principle by Carl Jung. She flipped to a random page. A line jumped out. The unexpected connection of inner and outer events may carry more meaning than any rational cause. Claire closed the book, her fingers lingering on the worn cover. She didn't buy it, not yet. But the word synchronicity stuck in her head like a whisper. That same evening, Claire began clearing out a drawer in her guest room. She wasn't expecting anything, just cleaning to avoid thinking. But buried beneath some old receipts and expired coupons was a small sealed envelope. Her mother's handwriting, shaky, loopy cursive that she hadn't seen in over a decade. Inside was a photo, Claire at 17, standing beside her mother on a winding trail near Crater Lake, Oregon. Claire was laughing. Her mother was holding her hand. Claire hadn't even remembered this photo existed. She sat on the floor and stared at it for a long time. Her chest ached, not from sadness but from something softer, like longing, like memory itself had reached out to hold her. That night, her phone rang. Unknown number. When she picked up, a familiar voice said, "Claire, it's Denise, your mom's friend. I don't know why, but I just felt like I had to call you tonight. You okay?" Claire didn't know what to say. The book, the photo, the call. It all felt connected. But how? Claire couldn't explain it. But something inside her, something small and quiet, told her to pay attention. So she began writing, not in her planner or a therapy app, but in an old blue journal she hadn't touched in years. She made a new section, not coincidences. She listed, book fell from shelf, Carl Jung. Found old photo of me and Mom. Random call from Denise the same day. She didn't label them signs. She didn't believe in signs. But still, it felt like something had nudged her. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a subtle, unseen hand. Aligning the pieces, that night, Claire had a dream. She was in her childhood kitchen, the old 70s wallpaper peeling at the corners. Her mother was there, wearing that faded yellow apron she always wore while baking. She wasn't saying anything, just humming softly, the same lullaby Claire hadn't heard since she was 8. Claire walked up to her and asked, "Are you really here?" Her mother turned, smiled gently, and whispered, "You're not broken, sweetheart. You're just listening now." Claire woke up crying, but it wasn't sadness. It was release. The next morning, she walked outside to her porch with a cup of tea. The sky was overcast, cold breeze. She sat quietly, thinking about the dream, the call, the journal. And then she saw it. A small blue butterfly, vibrant, almost glowing, landed gently on her wrist. She didn't move. She stared at it as tears rolled down her cheeks. She remembered something from the book cover, the same butterfly, printed faintly in the corner. She smiled, not because she understood what was happening, but because for the first time in weeks, she felt alive. That afternoon, she took a bus downtown. She didn't know why. She just felt pulled. The bus was half empty. A woman with short gray hair sat beside her, said nothing. When the woman stood to leave, she turned to Claire and handed her a small folded piece of paper. Claire blinked, confused. "Is this yours?" The woman smiled gently and said, "No, it's yours." Claire unfolded it slowly. It was a handwritten poem. "You are not lost. You are not broken. You are becoming. That's how stars are made, in silence and collapse." Claire pressed the paper to her heart. She didn't know what was happening, but she was beginning to trust it. Claire didn't have answers. She still had pain, confusion, sleepless nights. But now she also had awareness, a sense that the world wasn't just random events and forgotten dreams. It was a mirror, a map, a quiet symphony playing just beneath the noise. She began reading more Jung. She underlined, "Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see." Claire wasn't healed, not yet, but she had started to see. And maybe that was enough for now. In therapy, Claire finally told Dr. Ramirez everything: the book, the butterfly, the poem, the dreams. She expected skepticism, but Dr. Ramirez simply asked, "And how do all of these make you feel?" Claire paused. "I feel like something bigger is unfolding," she said, "like I've stepped out of a fog. But I don't know where I'm going." Dr. Ramirez nodded slowly. "Sometimes the psyche speaks through symbols when words can't carry the truth." And then she asked, "What part of yourself have you ignored for the longest time?" Claire didn't answer. But that question, it stayed with her. That evening, Claire opened a closet full of things she hadn't touched in years. Buried beneath winter coats was a dusty violin case. She hadn't played since her mother died. Her fingers shook as she opened it. The wood still smelled faintly of rosin and varnish. She tuned it, slowly, carefully. And then, with the bow trembling in her hand, she played a single note. Then another. The melody came back in pieces, like a language she used to speak in another life. As the final note faded, Claire felt something shift. Not outside, but inside. Something long asleep was waking up. A week later, she dreamt again. This time, the kitchen was dark. Her mother wasn't there. Instead, a younger version of Claire stood in the corner, eyes filled with rage. "You never listened to me," the girl snapped. "You just kept smiling, pretending, being good." Claire tried to speak, but the girl stepped closer. "You abandoned me," she whispered, "for approval, for peace, for him." Claire fell to her knees. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know how to be anything else." The girl reached out, took Claire's hand, and said, "Then start now." Claire opened her journal and wrote a letter. Not to David, not to her therapist, but to the version of herself she'd buried for years, the one who wanted more, the one who used to scream in silence. She wrote without censoring. "I thought being strong meant staying quiet. I thought love meant staying small. I thought purpose was something I had to earn, not something already within me." She signed it. "To the real me. I'm listening now." At a cafe the next day, Claire sat beside a young woman crying quietly over a laptop. Instinctively, Claire offered a napkin. The girl looked up, embarrassed. Claire didn't ask questions. She just said, "It's okay to fall apart. That's how we find the pieces that matter." The girl stared at her, then whispered, "You sound like my mom, if she were still here." Claire smiled. Neither of them spoke after that. But something passed between them. Something wordless. Something real. Downtown, Claire passed a small booth with a handwritten sign. "Tarot. Pay what you feel." Normally, she would have walked past, but something pulled her in. The reader was quiet, gentle. Her hands moved across the cards like waves on water. She flipped one card, the Tower. "Destruction," she said, "but also revelation." Claire didn't flinch. Then another card, the Mirror. "That's not a real card," Claire said. The woman smiled. "It's not meant for everyone, only those ready to see themselves." Claire left with no predictions, no answers, just a sense that the mirror had already been placed in her hands. On a ferry ride across Puget Sound, Claire stood at the edge of the deck, watching the city shrink behind her. The water was calm, and then, for just a moment, everything blurred. Not like a dream, but more like memory and reality folding into each other. She saw her mother, her younger self, the butterfly, the violin, the poem, the shadow girl. They weren't events anymore. They were all part of the same thing. Her wholeness, her becoming. Carl Jung's words came to her mind. "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Claire didn't go back to her old life, not entirely. She filed for divorce, gently, without war. She kept her job, but began leading after-school creativity circles for students, poetry, journaling, storytelling. She picked up her violin again. She called Denise back. She forgave her younger self. And most of all, she trusted her inner compass. The world still hurt, but now she knew how to listen. Late one evening, months later, Claire opened her journal to the last page. She wrote only this: "I used to think life was a puzzle I had to solve. Now I see it's a conversation I was meant to have. With myself, with the universe, with something deeper. And the synchronicities were just the universe's way of whispering, 'I'm here, you're not lost, keep going.'" She closed the journal. No fear, no confusion, just breath and stillness and the quiet, powerful knowing. that nothing was a coincidence. Not anymore.